Hi, all you cave dwellers, and welcome to the Cavern Podcast. The Cavern Club, the most famous club in the world. From the Beatles and the Stones to the Arctic Monkeys and Adele. Join us on our podcast for Cavern Conversations. Each episode we talk to a special guest with real Cavern connections. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Keats, and you are listening to Series 1, Episode 9. Now, today I am joined by one of the co-owners of the Cavern Club. She was born here in Liverpool, and growing up, she witnessed firsthand the formative years of the band that would go on to change the face of popular music forever. She's a retired teacher, an author, a huge fan of the Rolling Stones, which is ironic, as she is John Lennon's sister. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast, Julia Baird. Hi, Julia. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm very well, thank you.
Now, we're on Matthew Street. We're in our wonderful podcast studio, which you'd not seen, had you?
No, I didn't. I knew sort of vaguely about it, but I haven't been...
It's impressive, the studio, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic.
It's actually the broom cupboard, but it looks great. So thanks for coming in. Now, I was thinking before, there's so much me and you could talk about. We've known each other now a number of years. But I'd like to go right back, really. I think the listeners would like to hear about you growing up with John, your brother, as opposed to John the Beatle. You know, that the early days... Ironically, I mean, it brings us right back to full circle because you're on Matthew Street today for another Beatle event. So the Beatles are very much still part of your life. But let's go back and talk about, as somebody who I think is, we talk about John Lennon, we talk about the Beatles. Let's talk about Elvis, Julia. I mean, we could speak about the time when we remember the Elvis moment we spent together before we get into. Do you remember our Elvis moment, Julia?
No.
I'm going to remind you, I'm going to say 2 words. Well, it might be 3 words. Hard Rock Cafe, Elvis's jumpsuit.
Oh, God. My goodness. No, it wasn't the cafe, it was the warehouse, the storage warehouse.
It was their secret warehouse.
I was thinking of Memphis, because we've been to Memphis, haven't we? Oh, yes. And I think one of the curators was like, he was terrified because we had a leg each, didn't we?
He was showing us all these. It was brilliant. It was in the vaults he had this rack of clothes. And so this is just stuff that's been on it gets on tour. It's just come back from wherever. Prince's iconic purple jumpsuit was there. Yeah. There was an iconic Hendrix.
And Prince's leather jacket.
Yeah. No, Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson's leather jacket.
The red leather jacket.
This was on the top floor.
Yeah. So, and he knew what he was doing. It's like, we're the Cavern, well, we're the hard rock, look what we've got. But then it came, so he's showing us all these amazing things. And then he showed us Elvis's jumpsuit in the 70s. And yes, me and you had a moment where we caressed in the thigh of Elvis.
And then we took a leg each and he thought, oh no, it's going to split. He couldn't wait to get it off us.
I know. So we've established you're a big Elvis fan.
I am.
And also you're a big Stones fan, which we'll get onto.
I am. Yeah.
But Elvis, that was the music that you say that your mum played in the house. So.
She did, yeah. Well, my mum absolutely loved Elvis, and we had an old... His Master's Voice, the record player, with the needle was on a contraption, a gizmo as big as this, with the needle at the end, and you'd swing it over and put it onto the record, and it would immediately go until it settled down.
That's the anticipation, isn't it?
You had to be so careful with it, so careful. But we had the records. I remember my dad coming in. With the record, I remember him walking into the front room where the record player was and saying, "Is this it, Judy? Is this it? Is this what you wanted?" So he got a big hug for that. Right. And then it went onto the turntable. But I remember, and then they danced to the record. They did Latin American dancing. They used to go out and do Latin American proper dancing. Yeah.
Is that where you get it from? I've seen you move well, Julia. Especially after a few glasses of red.
I move even better then. Don't we all? So they danced to it. And when anyone came, Leela, John, of course, Stan, they all danced to these records. And my father loved Caruso. Leela loved Maria Lanza. Then it was moving into the Elvis era where you could actually dance rather than just listen to it or sing along. It was moving to the dancing. And Jackie and I, my sister and I, we'd be leaping up and down with them. We weren't dancing, but we'd be like leaping up and down with them. And it was a joyous time. It really was.
It sounds, I mean, it's as you're describing that, and like, you know, even the radiogram or the record. It
was a radiogram, yeah.
That is, everything's for the first time, isn't it? Everything's new. I mean, now we just take everything for granted, but this is exciting. But so Elvis is there. Your cat was called Elvis, is that?
The cat was called Elvis.
Remember you saying that?
Yeah, it was brought in. It was a stray. It was probably about 6 weeks old, we reckoned. And my mother christened it Elvis straight away, and it was a girl, and it had 6 kittens.
Oh, that's brilliant! I didn't know that. That's great.
But we kept the name.
So when John got into music and the Quarrymen, his first band, I mean, he wanted to be Elvis, didn't he?
Absolutely wanted to be Elvis. Elvis was the absolute icon. We didn't use that word in those days. We use it all the time now. We would have said idol.
Yeah.
It was his absolute idol. You had Frank Sinatra. First, I think it was the first known person that girls were screaming and, you know, come here, Frank, and Frank hauling them up on the side of the stage and all the rest of it going on. That was sort of pretty mild. Then Elvis comes along and changes that completely. You know, Tom Jones got a bit of it, Humperdinck, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's later on. But this is like 56.
The beginning.
56.
When Elvis got on that stage, we've all seen those snips. Oh my goodness, everyone was going crazy. Yeah. It was the birth of the teenager, wasn't it?
It was, and of course, you know, he took that music and sold it to the masses, didn't he? And started that whole rock and roll revolution. And everyone in Liverpool, suddenly, because it wasn't rock and roll initially, it was skiffle, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was skiffle.
So John's in the skiffle band, it's the Quarrymen. And then quickly that all...
Well, then the black blues music was coming over and it sort of morphed, didn't it? Yeah. From jazz and blues, and it mixed with the skiffle, and you ended up with the rock.
You know what's interesting? I mean, because obviously the Cavern, you know, you as a part owner of the Cavern today, which we'll talk about, when the Cavern opened in 57, so we're talking about 56, I would say, with Elvis, and that goes into January 57, the Cavern opens, it's a jazz club, it's a strict jazz club, but on the first night, there's one skiffle band on that lineup, the Ralph Watmo skiffle group from the Wirral. Oh, wow. And it's almost like they allowed skiffle, which was the early version of rock and roll, they morphed into rock and roll. And apparently the jazzers didn't mind skiffle because it was still a bit it was still a bit experimental and a bit loose. Yeah. But they were totally against rock and roll. But interestingly enough, the Quarrymen with John, not with Paul had joined by this time, but the Quarrymen made their debut in the Cavern in 1957 on the skiffle, you know, bandwagon. Yeah. Which the fact that they were doing that in 57. Yeah. And then obviously they played. It was in 61 before they played their early gig as the Beatles. But that whole excitement and the gig that the Quarrymen did on the back of the truck in Rosebery Avenue, was that their first gig or their? Because you all went to it as a family, and there's iconic pictures.
I don't know if it was the first one, John. It was the first public one for sure. Now, I'd been to some sort of village hall, memorial hall in Garston with my mother. That was before then, I think, but that wasn't anything like the Fete day.
So you're around 10 at this point, I think.
Yeah.
So what's it like? What is it? Is it just there's my big brother and he's suddenly
He was just John. He was just John. We were listening to the music all the time, so it was just taken to a different place. And when we did the Woolton Fete, and we all went up for the day, well, everybody went. We were talking about that actually next door. Everybody went because that was our social life. The church threw an event. Everybody went.
Yeah.
Police horses, Salvation Army, band, coconut shies.
Just pull the whole community in.
Everything. This is the first time they'd had a band on, though, wasn't it? Because of Pete Best. Not Pete Best.
Would it have been a kind of Mona?
No. Well, he lived in Woolton. Pete Shotton's mother.
Oh, yeah.
Pete Shotton's mum was on the church council. And
so that's how they got the gig.
That's how they got the gig. She had to persuade them. So this was a good thing. So we all went. Jackie and I spent the time when they were going along the high street, Allerton Road, trying to pull John off the back of the lorry. And he'd only sat down because he was like staggering, and he was taking this seriously. He was trying to really play seriously. So he sat at the edge of the coal lorry, which had been cleaned. He sat at the edge of the coal lorry, and Jackie and I immediately went and got a leg each.
Is this just to wind up your brother?
No, it was just, what I'm saying is, this wasn't a to-be world icon. This was John.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, doing exactly the same as he's been doing for a long time at home.
Well, it's always hindsight, isn't it? Because you can't talk about that day at the Woolton Fete, because that, of course, later on in the evening when they did a second gig.
Yeah, well, we went home then.
Yeah, but that day, which we recreated that for the 50th anniversary, we did together with the Cavern. But 50th and the 60th, I think. I don't know. All these anniversaries. Mm-hmm. But that later on that day, of course, is the most famous day.
The day that John met Paul.
Yeah, and isn't it? We're sitting there again, where we are now, just chatting about you and your brother and your family and your sister and that has now become that is the day they met and where it all began. It
was indeed, and who knows what would not have happened. Well, we know what would not have happened, but how it would have happened differently if Paul hadn't turned up that particular night. And they grew into what I call the dream team. Now, there's 4 Beatles, and they were, John and Paul were sort of equal in their lyrics and their music, providing the music for the lyrics. John scribbling away, and we see his nutty writing everywhere, don't we? Because he's writing faster than he thinks. And Paul must be thinking all the time, oh, that chord, that might sound okay here, and they come up with something. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, there's 4 of them, and I think that John is a genius. I don't think many people would refute that. No. But I wouldn't say that there were 2 geniuses in a group of 4. That is, I'd say, on calculus and tossing the dice, bloody impossible. Mm. So there was 1 genius in that group, and it was John, of course.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's that combination. That's and it's quoted. That's the day, things got started. That things started moving from that day. Yeah.
And before that, I'd said that there was, strangely enough, John in Springwood learning to play the banjo with my mother. Mm. And at the same time, Paul was 3/4 of a mile away, a 10-minute walk in the loo, twanging away when his dad is saying, come out of the loo with that guitar. And what did Paul say? There's been many a fine tune written in that room.
Absolutely.
And they were doing this at the same time, and they hadn't yet met.
I know.
I mean, the coincidence.
I know.
It's just amazing, really is.
Well, thank God they did meet.
Yes, indeed.
And it did get moving, quickly after that. I mean, but so it's still, you're still watching your brother, and he's in the band, but you must have seen, the progression and how things, they were getting more gigs. They were, it's like any band, a young band, they're getting better and better. And
they were, because they were in the kitchen, like rehearsing on Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening. And then it started where they would rehearse on Saturday afternoon and then they'd be going somewhere. Yeah. And one of the stories that I absolutely love, and I remember it, is they could only take a gig on a bus route.
Okay.
Because they had these instruments. Now, a lot of you around will remember the old green buses in Liverpool, where you got on, you had the cubby hole, and it was for prams and maybe a wheelchair even. You could get things on and off buses in those days. Your shopping, if you had too much shopping, you put it there, and then it would be there when you were getting off the bus as well. And they used to work out the bus route, and they put the instruments on the bus, and someone would pick it up in Litherland or in Garston or wherever they're going. Somebody was there to pick it up. And I believe they even had conductors who would move the instruments from one bus to the other bus because they were in on it as well. So they only did gigs on a bus route.
See, I've never heard that detail of swapping the buses. That's brilliant. But I know all, once the whole rock and roll scene, Mersey Beat, which became known as, obviously, all those bands, because there were so many bands, wasn't there? And they were all playing, and, you hear the stories of them getting all their gear on buses. And because, the kids of today, it's all, I'll just get an Uber.
Yes.
I've got there's van, everyone's got a van. But so it's moving, and you're watching that, and we've got to go to the Cavern, because that's such a big part of the story and continues to be a part of the story and part of your life today. So they made their debut in February 9th, 1961.
Yeah, as a rock group.
Yeah, as a rock group. So
the Beatles.
So it's still Pete Best is in the bands just before, it's a year or so before Ringo. And they start in between stints at the Cavern, where they become quickly a regular band, albeit a scruffy band. Wasn't it George Harrison almost didn't get in for the first gig because he had jeans on?
I don't know.
Yeah, because Ray McFall had a very strict policy, which is ridiculous. So they're then going between, the Cavern and other venues, all the circuits, and Hamburg. I mean, going to Hamburg must have been...
Well, you and I have done that trip, haven't we?
Yeah, we did the Hamburg tour.
We did the tour with that young lady.
Stephanie, yeah.
Yes, who literally rocked us all around Hamburg in the rain, playing the guitar at every viable point, if you like, where John had the photograph leaning on the wall.
When you go there now, it's so authentic, Hamburg. It's just... it hasn't changed much, has it? The Reaper Barn, it's brilliant.
I really, really enjoyed that tour, and that potato dish that they have. I don't know what it is, potatoes and vegetables. Oh, it was heaven, because I don't eat meat. I had that every time we sat down, so bring me those potatoes.
Yeah, it was a good trip.
It was. But the Hamburg thing, I hadn't done that. I've been to Hamburg, but I hadn't done the whole trip. This is why people should come on a Beatles tour by us, because Magical Mystery Tour, because to go with people who know exactly where to go, to time it, to have things arranged for you when you get to a certain place. You'll have a drink or a sandwich or something because you're moving on to the next place and the loo's here and all, rather than a landing in a city and thinking, right, let me have a look at that and where can we go, because you miss it all.
No, I totally. I mean, I think
that tour was fantastic.
I've had this conversation many times, and there was a Beatles festival last year in Hamburg, and we're currently talking to someone about a new hotel that's opening in Hamburg, and that gets the conversation going. Right, where they've never really been able to capitalise on that Beatles connection in Hamburg as much as they should have. No,
Cynthia and I went there many years ago, and it was for. I can't remember. It was a launch of something.
Was it there was a museum that opened just on the Reaper Barn, which lasted for a number of years.
Yes, that was it. And Cynthia and I did that together, and we had a ball, but we did not see what we saw with Stephanie.
Yeah,
that was a brilliant tour.
Because what we're talking about there is all those original venues many of them are still there. The Kaiser Keller, the Top 10,
exactly.
So, but those, the Beatles, the Silver Beatles, whatever they were called in that period. For how exciting, just as a young musician, to end up in Hamburg, and we know they were doing playing for hours and hours, and between that and their stints back in Liverpool, they very quickly became a force to be reckoned with, didn't they?
Well, somebody said to Paul in interview at one point, you sort of made it because it was quick then, wasn't it? You sort of made it overnight and you didn't really have to work for it. And he said, what about the 800 hours we did in Hamburg? Absolutely. That was his response to that.
Well, if you put that into context, that the band in its earliest form got together in 57. They're in Hamburg and the Cavern 61, 62. They don't start making, it's 63. It's 6 years. 6 years apprenticeship.
That's right, because Love Me Do came out in November.
October 62.
Right, and then 63 was Please Please Me.
That was
the launch, the real.
That's when even the word Beatlemania was coined for the first time. But we're sitting there and it's exactly 60 years ago. So I often say this when we're having this conversation. It freaks me out. Beatles made the Cavern debut 9th of February 1961.
Right.
3 years later, on the 9th of February 1964,
Really?
to the day, 3 years from the day that these scruffs turn up, George doesn't get in because he's got jeans on. These scruffs play
He'd already
the Cavern.
been thrown out of Germany for being too young.
He was troubled.
Poor old George.
That George, he was the bad one. So February the 9th, 1961, they make their first appearance at the Cavern Club. 3 years to the day, they make their debut.
Another coincidence.
Yeah, it's 3 years. Yeah. But look what they achieved.
To the day.
February the 9th, 1964, 73 million people on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
In what they achieved in that 3 years, and this is the whole Hamburg, the whole thing, and it's now 60 years ago. We just celebrated the 60 years of them doing that, which is the start of the whole British invasion and them taking over the world. From you, this is what I'm interested from your point of view. Just watching this unfold.
Yeah.
You're seeing this unfold. Surely there's part of you can't believe that this is happening, or did you have the blind faith that it was going to happen?
No, we didn't. We just didn't think like that. Now, if you can come back to the skiffling, John and the banjo and everything, we lived down in Springwood, and there were many large families, mainly Catholic families, who were our friends. If they had an older brother, if any of the girls had an older brother, it wouldn't be, is he in a band, a group? It would be, what does he play and does he sing?
Right.
That was just what it was like. And if you could put a drone, a modern day drone, and go over the whole country at that time, all the garden sheds and kitchen doors would have been, and bathroom windows would have been rattling away, because there were these mainly young lads in them all trying to make music. It was the most popular thing that any young lad was doing.
And it all goes back to Elvis.
All goes back to Elvis, of course. They all had the sideburns. And I remember John walking down the road in Blomfield Road in Springwood. I remember him walking down with the black leather jacket and the black jumper and the winkle pickers and everything. And then a guitar would appear on his back. He wasn't the only one doing it. No. Everybody was. It was the raison d'etre, modus vivendi, and all that. It was the way people lived their lives, not just in Liverpool. It was going on, as we know from all the bands that came from Manchester, Birmingham, London. It was all going on.
It was an explosion, wasn't it?
And if you go to America, it would have been the same thing. So it wasn't just here. It was everywhere. They just happened to be so special because of the dream team, I believe, because of John and Paul and their relationship in every which way, from both losing their mothers to that. It was almost an instant fraternal connection that they had. And then they found they were doing the same thing, 3/4 of a mile apart. And they came together, and it was almost like an accident, a very happy accident, just waiting to be triggered.
Yeah, and you can't within this story of that, how they got to where they got to. So we're, the Beatles, 1964, are now taking over the world. Brian Epstein has got to, his determination as well.
Absolutely.
Without Brian, he banged the doors. He made it happen, didn't he?
Yeah.
But it did happen, and it became huge. And it was America in the February '64, and then of course, even by then they made the first film. So we're on to I'm going to go to the July of that year when there was the Hard Day's Night, the northern premiere of the Hard Day's Night film, and there was the famous Homecoming where all the streets were. This is crazy, isn't it? They get off the plane at the old Speak Airport, which is now the John Lennon Airport, for anyone who doesn't know.
That was John's first Saturday job.
At Speak Airport?
My dad was the manager of the airport hotel, and he caught John smoking. And the biggest thing was, he said, right, you're going to get a job and pay for your own, because obviously he'd been nicking them.
And it was I didn't know that was
my father gave him a job waiting on.
That's brilliant. And it's now called How do you think John would have felt about the airport being called John Lennon Airport?
I think he'd have loved it.
Yeah, would have laughed as well.
He would. But I can't see him ever saying they shouldn't have done that. I think he would have revelled in it.
Yeah. So that's a little nugget I didn't know about them working there. But they had the homecoming, and I know, and it was the big civic reception at the town hall, and then the premiere at the Odeon, and you were all there. Mm-hmm. And the photos and the footage from that, it was insane, wasn't it? The streets were just packed.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it was the only time since Dixie Dean came back in 1922, with the Everton ebullience and celebrations. It was the only time since then that the city had been closed down, that roads had been closed, on a huge scale to get them from the airport and in. I think that was it might have happened since, but it was the only time since then. But when the Hard Day's Night was premiering, we wanted to go to London, the four of us, me, David, Michael, Jackie, we wanted to go to London, and I spoke to John on the phone. He phoned the cottage, and I said, we want to come to London, we want to come to that. He said, oh, Julia, the real one is in Liverpool, believe me. This is something we just have to get out of the way. Yeah. We have no choice. We cannot wait to come to Liverpool. So that was, I don't know if he was just placating me, but
no, I'm sure, because you're talking 1964, and they're still very much, they are that connection with Liverpool was still there. They moved to London at this point?
Yes, they have.
About a year before, maybe 6 months.
Yes. Yes, they'd moved to London.
But you can only look at it just as you would do if it was you. If you're coming back, it's like, no, this is mine. We're going back.
This is
home.
my city, and they were still very much rooted in Liverpool. That sort of loosened as years went on, but at that point, they were still concreted into their own city.
After that, so it gets bigger and bigger, and we all know the story and which the next album and then where they went to. As a family, did you still manage to keep in touch during that whole period? Was it difficult?
Well, it was phone calls, and when they got the house when John and Cynthia went down, first of all, they stayed in, Brian found them somewhere, and they were in a flat because they had Julian. And then they bought Kenwood, the house, and we were invited down immediately, and we went to stay with John and Cynthia for that. I think they'd moved in, everyone will correct me here, September, October, and we went down for the Christmas show.
Okay.
So Jackie and I went to the Finsbury Park Astoria Christmas show because we were staying with them in Kenwood.
Is this the gig that the Rolling Stones were on?
Well, I don't know if they were on. They were in the dressing room.
Yeah. Because we've got to talk about the Rolling Stones. It's brilliant. You are a huge Rolling Stones fan.
I am a huge
Julia, there's a door to the right and a door to the left. If you turn right, it's Rolling Stones. Yeah. You turn left, it's the Beatles. Are you going right or left?
Straight ahead to Elvis.
Oh, you dodged that one beautifully. I always say if there's a door to the right and it's Elvis, and a door to the left, it's the Fonz. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
the Fonz.
I love the Fonz.
Yeah, me too. I love the Stones because I love that type of music. And, when we've been going to America, Roger and I end up in the Mississippi. We're in all those clubs. We're not just saying we like it, we seek it out.
Yeah.
And we go and we're in that music. I love jazz. I love Miles Davis. I love all the progressions up and through. And the Stones represent that for me just beautifully. The Beatles, I didn't like Let Me Do. And when John brought the record up to the cottage, and we had the record player upstairs in our bedroom, and he came up and put it on, and we all sat on the beds. And he said, "What do you think?" And I went, truly. Because he wasn't a Beatle to me, he was just John.
Yeah.
And when Please Please Me came out, it was, whoa, you're going places.
We're going up again here.
Right. And then they did things like Yellow Submarine. Oh, come on. The Stones wouldn't have touched it. And Paul has since said, it should never have been released.
Well.
And if they weren't the Beatles, it wouldn't have been, would it?
Yeah, no,
and then people say, oh, children love it, and they love dancing to it. They're supposed to be a rock group.
I know. I must admit, I did this on stage yesterday. I do a bit of a I send it up a little bit, shall we say? But I'll do it, and I have a joke that I'll only sing. I only usually sing Yellow Submarine when it's half term. Oh no, it's hot because it was half term.
Children, yeah.
So you're doing it, and you do see the kids, but and it is that you say, okay, in hindsight now, it's their introduction to the Beatles. They get into Yellow Submarine, and because it's an easy one, I go, but I must admit, away from half term, you're in the Cavern and you're singing Yellow Submarine, and I'm sending it up, and you've got all these adults from all over the world going, we are. And I think if an alien walked in now and they're all saying, you think these are all mad.
Yeah, we'll exterminate this lot.
But moving on from Yellow Submarine, I mean, the Beatles progressed so much, and they did everything for the first time. So there's that, the Stones. I think we've danced together to the Stones many times.
Can't sit down.
And we went to see them, didn't we? At Anfield.
We did.
Yeah, it took a lot to get me on that particular football pitch, being not supporting Liverpool. But we went to see the Stones together, which that was great. But so it's hard to moving on from your own career. Now, how did you get on with, as that's progressing and John's becoming a Beatle and becoming more of a Beatle, becoming such an you said before, icon. Did you deliberately try and just do your own thing, make a conscious decision to try and do that and live your own life? Because I can imagine, I think that's what, from our conversations, that's what you did.
Yeah, well, it was aided and abetted by, I met the person that I married, the father of my children, and he was Irish. So I'm older than he is, so I'd finished my degree, and then I went to join him in Ireland, and we got married in Belfast in 1968. So that was a physical separation. Now, when we were doing the Beatles thing this morning, and I said I didn't know about it, I was already over in Belfast in June 1968. And I've no doubt if I had been in this country, then I would have known more about it. But we were all sort of getting on with our lives. I had a baby in 1970, and John rang up, the congratulations, this is fantastic, and all the rest of it. I had a baby in 1972, by which time we were about 1971, another one. Back here, I had my daughter in Oxford Street. And then I had a third baby. I mean, you're living your own life.
Your own life.
You can't live vicariously.
No.
I don't think it's a good thing to do. People do it, but, you've got to get on with your own life, haven't you?
Yeah.
And, I mean, sadly, before we could get back together, John died. But, who wants the crystal ball?
No, I know. And I know you did reconnect in the mid-70s.
Yeah. He rang us. Yeah. He rang us in spring 1974. I was over in Wallasey, where we were living. I cooked something, and my aunt rang from Edinburgh, Mater, and she said, "Julia, sit down, I've got some news for you." And I went, Why? I thought something awful had happened. And she said, No. She said, "John's looking for you. He's looking for the girls." And I said, "Brilliant. About time too." And I was given a phone number, and she said, "Don't ring till midnight." Now, I had 3 children.
Stay awake.
Stay awake, which of course I did. And that night we spent nearly 4 hours on the phone.
And how many years had it been since you'd spoken?
Well, that was 1974. So since we'd actually 1970.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
You had a lot to catch up on.
When I had Nicky.
A lot to catch up on.
We did. But most of the conversation was mummy, mummy, and mummy. And my ex-husband, he was an amateur photographer for pleasure, just pleasure. He used to take photos of groups in Belfast, and because my sort of brother-in-law, my sister-in-law's husband, had been in Hawkwind, the Stylistics, and they played in Belfast. So, because they were from there, Alan would take lots of pictures and print them up for him. We had the bathroom that was also a dark room. And he had blown up pictures for me of our mother and some of John and the entire family. As I don't know if you want this little story, but my mother used to say to all of us when we were young, let's draw, because she could draw, paint, anything. Let's draw a room, and let's put everything in it apart from the loo. So where would you have this, and where would you have this, and where would you have your windows? And we'd draw them and paint them and colour them. Well, John had the same thing. I had it, and Jackie had it, the room. So he just said, describe the room you're in. And I went, oh, John, I can feel it now. I just burst into tears, and so did he. He said, Julia, tell me, look around the room, tell me all about it. And I said, well, I'm in the room where all the photos are. So I'm telling him. Now, the big photo of my mother when she was pregnant with Jackie that you've all seen, because there aren't many, John was at the side. She was holding on to John. I'd said to Alan, I don't want John on it. I just want Mummy. And he'd done 4 20x16s.
Yeah.
And like soldered them all together. And it was up as a picture on the wall. And he said, send it to me. I want it. I said, oh, John, I haven't got another one. He said, you've got the dark room, haven't you, in the house? So the next day, I took every picture off that wall. And so we had to dismantle the 4 and put them, I don't know how they did it, put them, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And I sent it all to John. I never got them done again.
Was that because you were
Alan was working, he was running his own business. It had been something that he'd done when he had the time to do it. We've still got all the negatives. I've still got all those negatives that he did, that he had taken from those pictures, not the original negatives, the negatives that he took to get the pictures. Yeah. And then over the years, I've seen on the piano or somewhere pictures that they've got in the Dakota. They're all from them are from that.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on one hand, he obviously wanted that connection, needed that connection, and you were able to provide that. But then you're left and you haven't got them yourself.
Yeah, Alan said, "I'll do them. Well, didn't get done, but John did get the photos. He got his quarry bank tie. He got the clock from Mendips. George Toogood Smith. He got the clock that was in the hall in Mendips. So he was obviously, well, the very fact that he was phoning, and this is thanks to May Pang. Yeah. May, thank you. Julian has to thank May Pang.
We spoke to May. May did one of the episodes on the podcast, and I knew that anyway, as not only as a fan, but also, I've got to know May over the years. But having watched their documentary, it's so key. Yeah. Her part in that, and bringing John and Julian back together, and we said it in the podcast. It's that her friendship that lasted forever with the lovely Cynthia as well.
Oh yes.
And it's. So May Pang made so he obviously wanted that connection with his real family. His real life, his family, and we know that when he was recording, because with Double Fantasy, and that fantastic band that he had together, which we got together for Beatle Week a couple of years ago, which was wonderful to get them back in the room, and there was talk of coming to the UK on a tour. Which obviously, sadly, never happened.
Well, that was the starting over, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was that whole rebirth. I want to talk about the book that you wrote, because it's the catalyst for why you wrote the book, and I guess it was because, as quite often, this story this is your family story. But it becomes public property, which you're used to, because that's what you had to grow up with John. And the effect on you and the family. But you've felt compelled to write that first book.
Now, we're talking about John Lennon, my brother.
Yeah.
Right. That was in 1986.
Yeah.
I wrote that because there was a panorama documentary on in 1985. I don't know when it was in the year. I think it was wintertime. And it was a documentary sort of commemorating 5 years since John had died. So it must have been about Christmas, mustn't it? Anyway, I had 2 teenagers then. And David is 9 years younger. Same marriage, but he's 9 years younger. So he's the baby. The teenagers are at high school in Chester. And they said, Mummy, we want to watch it. Everyone in school will. Yeah, I said, all right, okay, they will. Everyone will be talking about it the next day. And, Nikki and Sarah weren't going to be allowed to watch it. That wasn't going to happen, was it? So David's in bed. It was on later, and we sat and watched it. I cried from beginning to end. There were so many faults in it. I can't begin to document them. I was crying throughout. And a friend rang and said, I'm going to come and see you. I'm going to come right now. And she did. And she said, well, we know this isn't true. I said, I know. And what do I do? And at the end of it, at the end of the documentary, there's Yoko and Sean, who was 5, sitting on a sofa in New York. What do you think of the documentary? To Yoko, she said, oh, it's wonderful. This is a great way for Sean to learn about his father's family. Well, Mimi had 3 flying ducks on the wall. I did laugh at that. Cynthia had a headscarf on, like she'd just come out of the market. I'm not denigrating that in any way, but this is the blonde bombshell, the Bridget Bardot that John had created out of Cynthia. I mean, Cynthia was utterly beautiful. That bone structure, you can't buy it. She was beautiful. Mm. And she'd gone blonde, hadn't she, for John? And they'd made her look dowdy. Julian wasn't even mentioned in it.
And this is in the documentary.
The panorama, BBC. Yeah. So the next day,
awful,
believe it or not, I rang the BBC and got through to the producer. Now, would you do that now?
No chance.
No chance. Like something else, the other thing I was telling you can't get to anybody now. So he said, how can I help you? I said, well, I'm John's sister. He said, you're not. I said, oh, I am. And he said, John doesn't have any sisters. I said, he has 3. I said, half sisters, but we've all got the same mother. He said, no, we have done thorough research and John is an only child. And put the phone down.
Okay, so
yeah. Well done, BBC. Yeah. You haven't changed at all. So I thought, I've got to do something.
Yeah. I can't even imagine how you felt.
I didn't realise that a story or anything could get so wildly out of kilter and be accepted as true. The thorough research, if he'd have found me, I would have cooperated.
Yeah. Of course you would. So you had to put the story straight.
I did.
But was that a battle to get your story told, to get it published? Or
no, not at all.
They were chomping at the bit to get the truth.
Absolutely not at all. It was easy to get it published, and in fact, it was at Beatle Week because I then had the first thing I wrote was 100-page about handwritten calligraphic pen with all the photographs. This is in the days before somebody 6,000 miles away said, I own that photo. Mm. Yeah, before those days, when they were mine.
Yeah.
Well, they still are. So wrote this handwritten book, came and found Bill and Dave. They said, well, we've got this festival, this trade day.
Yeah.
And I ended up that summer going to the trade day.
Which is Convention Day, it's now part of International Beatle Week, which is now the whole...
it was one day then.
Yeah, and they take not long taken over that.
So it all stemmed from there, basically from Dave and Bill. Yeah. Basically from Dave and Bill.
Well, Dave and Bill will come into in a bit because you eventually you became a part owner, shareholder of the Cavern Club a few years later. Mm. But through their contacts, because they, the pioneers in the whole what is now a Beatle industry, which it is a real industry, which is run well in Hull as a city. But they were the pioneers, and did they help open the doors to the Beatle community? Is that how that worked?
I didn't know what was going on. I mean, when I came to Liverpool, it was to shop or pay the mortgage, or because it was in Castle Street, the building society. I didn't go to the Cavern. I had children, dogs and cats.
Yeah.
So it was a new world to me, because I'd really left it all behind when John died, even before that. So they did open doors, and the book was published. The problem was, I went round to each of my aunts, because they were all alive then, and told them what I was doing. And, told Nanny what I was doing. She was the chronicler, the family chronicler. And she said, are you dear? Are you dear? And I told Mimi she wasn't happy about it. And I said, well, I'm doing it, Mimi. I'm sorry, but I'm telling you before. My other two aunts had died in 1972 and 1975, Harry and Mater. So I did the book, but it was just to say that actually we're alive, and maybe even more importantly, Julian is alive. There was a son before the 5-year-old, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And that was what the book was about. But the family were very tight-lipped. And I often say, if I'm giving a talk, many of you here will have skeletons in the cupboard that you don't even know that cupboard is there.
Yeah.
And many older people in your families just hope that they die before the story is out.
Yeah.
This was one of those occasions. So the book was published, and it was true, but it wasn't the complete story, because I didn't have it.
Okay, hence, a few years later, I've got the year. You will know the year your second book came up.
2006.
Yeah, 2006. Imagine this growing. The next one's imagine this growing up with my brother John Lennon.
Cynthia and I decided that we would write our book together. So you'd had A Twist of Lennon, and you'd had John Lennon, my brother. And if you put them together, you got the early John. But neither of us had been able to dig to the bottom of the story. Well, the longer it was, the more that people knew things. But I stayed away from that. But Cynthia came over to stay, and we talked about it, and we were going to do it together. And I was going to work one morning. I just had a shower. The phone goes. It's a landline in those days. Phone goes. I go to the phone thinking it's one of the kids that I'm going to work with.
Yeah.
Not well, not there, been in trouble. That was my job. Picked the phone up, and it was somebody I'd never heard before, and she was from Hodder. And she said, I've been talking to your sister-in-law, she still called her, which she was to me. And she says that you've been collating notes and photographs. I said, is Cynthia? She said, yes. And yes, well, she's writing a book with us. Well, I didn't know.
Okay.
So I said, oh, right. So she said, you've got all the letters? I said, yes. You've got the photographs? I said, yeah. She said, could I meet you? And I said, yes. She said, tomorrow, Manchester Airport. And she flew to Manchester Airport, had to cancel. All the kids were thrilled, of course. Won't be coming tomorrow, won't be coming tomorrow. Put the phone down, phone Cynthia. Oh, love.
Yeah.
She always called me love. I was going to tell you. And I didn't know she'd phone you so soon. It was a Friday. She said, I was going to phone you over the weekend. I said, don't worry, son. I said, I'm never going to have time to do this. I'm meeting her tomorrow at Heathrow. And I got all the stuff in a big carrier bag, went to Manchester Airport, and Cynthia's ghostwriter was there. She looked at it, she said, this is all yours. I said, yeah, I know. She said, why are you giving it away? I said, because it's Cynthia. And we were actually going to do it together. And I'd started, but Cynthia hadn't.
Right, okay.
So Cynthia knew that I had all this stuff. Every now and again we'd talk and say, oh, and I've got. So she said, could I, if we could find an office here, could I photocopy some of it? I said, you can take it all down to London. I trust everybody, John.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I trust everyone. She said, are you joking? I said, no. She said, my flight back is at 4:00. I said, take it all down. I said, please don't lose any of it. She said, oh, I will not. And the next thing is, before the next week was out, I had a phone call from the editor, the head honcho of these things, this particular genre of book, from Hodder. And she said, will you come down to London? We want to talk to you. That's how the book was written. I was about to give everything to Cynthia. In the end, we sort of split it.
Yeah.
But
presumably Cynthia was fine with that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And she did her book, and then mine came out afterwards, straight afterwards, really. And then the recession came, so it sort of got clouded over for a while.
Yeah. But I know that you promote the book, and I know you've travelled. I've been on many trips with you to do with the Cavern, and you talk about the book. You'll sign the book, because you want the story told. That's the mission, isn't it? Really,
absolutely, to get out that my mother actually had 4 children. Don't be limiting her to one. She had 4, and Victoria, the daughter who was adopted, who's between me and John. Looking back, I know what that did to my mother. I absolutely know it. And John being torn out of her arms by Mimi and social services. And you've got to read it to know that it's true. Now, what actually happened was Nanny, the aunt who lived until she was 86, she never forgot anything. She never forgot a birthday. You always got money. You always had a present. She was the one.
Every family needs that member, doesn't it?
Nanny was the one. Well, I really loved Nanny, and I sort of took her on. She couldn't have got rid of me if she wanted to. I would go to work and go straight to her. And as she got more frail, not mentally, more frail, I would come out of work in Chester, and instead of turning right to go home, I'd find myself turning left. I'd stop in Bebbington at the same phone box. I'd say, Nanny, I'm on the way. Oh, good dear, I'll put the split toast on. And she made fabulous split toast. And we just
Can I just ask a question? Because Paul's in the corner recording this thing, and he's thinking, what's split toast?
It's thick bread, and then you cut it in half and you toast it, and you put the other 2 ends together with thick butter.
Oh, nice.
Oh, my goodness. And that
sounds quite filthy.
That was the snack. That was the snack. And we'd sit and we'd talk and we'd talk. And I had always been asking her about our family story. And she would always say, no, I'm not talking to you. When I learned about Victoria, it was just before meeting Bill and Dave.
Yeah.
That was a big trigger, I can tell you. Bill Smithies, of the editor of the Liverpool Echo, came to see me and was talking about Victoria, and he saw my face. He said, you don't know, do you?
What a way to find out.
He said, I'm going. You better go and find some family member to talk to, and I will get in touch with you, which is exactly what he did. I went down straight away to see Nanny as soon as he left the house. I said, Nanny, Victoria, tell me about Victoria. And she burst into tears and said, I will not discuss your mother's pain with you. So she ran upstairs, this huge house, and I'm downstairs, and we're both sobbing. Yeah. But she wouldn't talk to me. So suddenly she started talking. And I phoned Stan, who'd always wanted to know the story. I said, Stan, Nanny's talking. He said, put a tape recorder under her chair. I said, never. I would remember it. And I did. And she would tell me the story again. And are you listening? And are you listening? And all I say is, we'd be here till next month if I started on the book. It's all in the book. And I'm not saying it to promote the book. I'm saying there's no way that we can go through this entire story.
No, but I think the key thing is what I picked up on is you want people to read that book.
I want people to read the book.
Now, I'm going to go back to, so you met Bill and Dave and they were the catalysts for the first book.
They were.
Pioneers of the whole Beatles industry. They started Cavern City Tours. They were doing the Beatles Magical Mystery Tour buses. Cavern City Tours.
Entrepreneurs. True entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. They got the Cavern in 1991. which was the missing piece of what they wanted to do. And
Yes.
it took them years to get it, to get it what it is now. It's anyone who comes to Cavern Club today, the Cavern Club in 1991, forget what it was like in 57, 63 when the Beatles were there. What it was like in 1991 was a completely different thing, and they had the vision. So, and we know where we're up to now.
Yeah.
The Cavern is thriving, and we're here. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that.
No.
But so you get to know them, and you come into the convention, and you're slowly getting into this whole Beatle world, aren't you? This
It was like a magnet. It was drawing me in. Also, years of not doing it. It was almost a conscious decision to throw myself in.
Yeah.
At the point where I bought in.
Yeah, but that's how you end up coming into the company, isn't it?
We were having a celebratory meal, and we'd all had a drink, and Bill was talking to me, and he said, they were having a few difficulties. And I said, well, where are you going to go with it then? I'm just an outsider here. Where are you going to go with it? He said, I don't know. I said, what do you think an answer would be? He said, and I know it was in absolute innocence. He said, well, we need someone to come in to buy in bits. Yeah. Now, come back. I'm working full-time, teaching in Chester. And Roger and I had bought one house, done it up, sold it, walked round the corner, saw another house, beautiful, traditional semi, long garden, backing onto the allotments in Chester. These are rare. And this woman was just knocking the sign in. And I said, you can take that out. Bought that house.
Okay.
Did it up. And we just sold it. And I just had a call before we left England to say, the sale has gone through, everything has happened. I said, I've already got my eye on the next house, which I pass all the time. And I think, maybe I should have bought that.
Right, yeah, maybe.
And I just said, do you know what, Bill? I could do that. And he went, you'd need, and he mentioned money. I said, I could do that. He said, are you serious? He said, look, we've had a drink. Let's talk in the morning. So we go to bed. I just go straight to sleep. I didn't give it another thought. Woke up in the morning, opened the door. He was there outside the door in the morning. And he said, have you thought about it? I said, well, yes, because I had when I woke up. I said, I think I'm in. He said, are you serious? I said, I think so. I was hesitant, but in, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was like I jumped off the diving board, but I was saying halfway down, can you just stop me for a minute? I don't know if I want to hit the water.
Presumably there's got to be a conversation with Roger at this point.
Well, it happened to be the best investment I could ever have made. Yeah.
So that's...
But we didn't know that.
No.
It was a huge risk.
Because the company was I mean, it ended up, hugely in debt.
It did.
Which as a company, we managed to claw back, and what you see today is a completely different thing. So that's how you got involved in a story, and that's how... So it all goes back to that first meeting with Bill and Dave.
It absolutely does.
But everything that has come with that, I mean, it's other stuff that you do, Strawberry Fields.
That's only come on because Strawberry Fields has happened. I mean, forever it's been a wasteland, hasn't it? But even when it was a residential school, I used to go out there and have a chat with there was a Brian, there was a Keith, I can't remember who was the head. I took people out there, encouraging them to make a donation. We go out and have a cup of tea with them and stuff like that, when it was the newer building, you know. But of course it was abandoned for such a long time that when it was suggested that they were going to rebuild it, none of us had any idea it was going to be the stunning building that it is.
And it's not just the building, it's what they do and what the whole ethos, which I know appealed to you.
Well, it was like, I taught French and English and stuff for years. And then I took a break because I thought the children needed me at home. And then I sort of went back and did more studying, and I ended up working as, I call it, a street worker for the Educational Psychology Service. I would be the one that would pick them up. And then British Aerospace donated us an aircraft hangar in Blacon, which is a big sink estate. And it was 50-50 social services and education, and I got the education keys.
Yeah.
So I loved working in that. So when it come, that was EBD, emotional and behavioural difficulties, totally different from, I was in Caldy Boys Grammar School, Harden High School, very nice, which I loved. But this was just a totally different concept altogether.
Challenge.
Absolutely. So when it came to Strawberry Field, it's not the same level, or it's not the same genre of disability.
Yeah, not the same difficulties.
Yeah. It is a difficulty. It's not quite mainstream, but then define mainstream. Define it. It's impossible to do. So these are mild to moderate learning difficulties. So we have a range from autistic to anxious and panic-stricken and Down syndrome and Asperger's, and the blips that have stopped these youngsters, a good mix of girls and boys, young men, young women, because they're from 16, that have fallen through every net in most cases until the age of 16, because schools can't cope. So if they stop coming to school, nobody's knocking on their door, believe me. It's just like they're not coming to school because they haven't got the facilities that everybody needs. And suddenly they have it. 180 students have gone through, and at least 90, almost 100 of them are in paid employment throughout this city.
So they go on this course to learn work skills. How long are the course?
8 weeks.
8 weeks.
And there's about 8, 9 students on each course. And it is just a brilliant program because the coaches are fantastic with them. And they've grown with the program as well. Yeah. And each student is encouraged to go as far as they can. Now, next door at the Beatles thing that we just did today, one of the students walked up to me with a camera, "Can I take a picture, Julia?" And I'm going, "Oh, I know you. You're one of the students." Yeah. I said, "Where have you got your job?" Beatles story.
Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it?
And they've got him doing different things all the time so that he's getting a good grounding in it. We've got them everywhere.
But even that's just a small nod to what I said before about the Beatle industry. And that's the Beatle industry, which is that level. And, there's... our friends down at Beatles Story, there's the educational department. We've just been involved in appointing the first Beatles education officer. Yeah. Because it's the Beatles is not just Yellow Submarine.
No.
It's not just that.
No, it doesn't.
And it's where it's
historical.
Yeah.
It's the history.
It's culture.
It is
art.
The birth of the teenager might have been with Frank Sinatra and Elvis, but the burst of the teenager was the Beatles.
Absolutely. So that journey, from maybe being there, just going back on it, seeing this as your brother just doing what he's doing, and he becomes this and becomes that. You do your own thing, and then you come back to it, and it's the same for all of us here. This. I wouldn't have a job without the Beatles. I say that on stage when I'm gigging in there. What we do here. But we do it right. We look after it and we welcome the world, don't we, every day? And we and you...
we nurture it.
We do. And me and you are lucky that we've been away many times together.
We certainly have.
And it's always... we obviously have a great time. But you do talks, I'll sing. We've quite often presented your John Lennon, the poet.
Yes.
Where you look at John's music as poetry. Yeah. I sing them, I read them, and... we look at John's. Yeah. So we've done all these wonderful things. We've all been, because of what they did all those years ago.
Exactly.
We're all very lucky. Japan was good, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember when we went? It was meant to be. We did the we're talking about the 60th anniversary of the Beatles in New York. Mm-hmm. We did the big 50th anniversary.
Yes.
Where we went with the Cavern Club Beatles. And we were meant to do the similar thing for when they played the Budokan.
Yes.
Japan.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, it didn't end up as it was meant to be the Cavern Club Beatles, everyone, and it ended up just me and you going.
Yeah.
And I remember Roger dropped you off at the airport. I mean, we've been everywhere, haven't we?
Yeah.
You've been there. And we said, and we both said sort of, feel a little bit, you don't really know what we're flying into it, because it was so different, wasn't it?
It was completely different into that culture. It was absolutely mind-blowing, really. I mean, the hotel was phenomenal. Yeah. Their baths, their everything, the cleanliness. I'm not saying all Japan is like that, but this is what we were treated to there. Yeah. Mr. Hamada was more than gracious. Mr. Hamada, gracious host.
He's Mr. Beatles in Japan. And they had, I always remember, that's a funny story. I mean, they had all these nuts for the Beatles over there.
Yeah.
So everywhere we went, more importantly, everywhere you went, it was, and you as always, you are gracious with everyone. You'll pose for the photos. But do you remember there was there was 2 nights of a BBC equivalent. They did a show which was being filmed. And pretty much all you needed to do during the show was, at some point, I think the light came on you. You stood up and you waved to everyone. Everyone got excited and they got on with the show. So we did that the first night. Yeah. And then the second night, we knew what was coming. The light came on. He did that. And as soon as he said, right, we've done that now, we can go. And we sneaked out and went back to the hotel bar. But that was a great trip. And this whole journey has afforded us all these wonderful things.
It is a journey, and we're still on it. It is a journey. The vehicles are changing, the destinations are changing, but we're moving all the time.
We are. I've got to thank you for coming in. And we ask every guest we're compiling a Spotify Cavern Podcast playlist.
Yeah.
So every guest has to choose 3 songs by Liverpool artists that we will include. So what are your 3 songs that are going into the playlist?
Right. Watching the Wheels.
I love
John.
that song.
I do. I just love it. All those people trying to get him out there, and he's saying, just hang on a minute. Because Starting Over came next.
Yeah.
And so Watching the Wheels. I wanted something by Cilla Black, because we've got the statue outside. John loved her, and I wanted something. So have you already taken, you've lost that loving feeling?
By Cilla? No. There are a couple of Cilla Black songs being chosen, but no.
Is that all right?
I'm not even familiar with that version of it.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And then the Righteous Brothers brought it out about a month later.
Okay, I didn't know that. Yes, yeah. That can go in. Okay.
And Elvis Costello.
Great choice.
Yeah. I don't know what, though.
Well, I mean, you could go anywhere with Elvis. Elvis Costello, I mean, I was with him about 6 months ago.
Really?
Yeah, he almost played. He's never played the Cavern, but we've almost got him on a number of occasions. And last year, Ian Prowse does the Monday Night Club every Monday.
Yeah.
Original artist, and he's good mates with Elvis. And he's kept on he said, one of these days I'm going to turn up. He was meant to do it about 6 months ago. And if something happened, his wife, Diana Kroll, got COVID at the last minute.
Oh, right.
But lovely guy, and he's good for. Whenever he's in Liverpool, he comes to the Cavern.
Yeah,
we've taken him on the Magical Mystery Tour.
I can't believe he hasn't been on the stage.
No, it just, as I say,
I just assumed he would have been.
No, it's never quite happened. But what a songwriter, and what a gent.
Yeah. Something really punky.
Oh, punky. Okay. Well, the obvious one is Oliver's Army.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, if that's where I think it all began for Elvis.
It's probably his most celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone on to do some wonderful stuff.
I actually listened to that when I got on the phone and did a Spotify to listen to Oliver's Army.
Okay.
It's one that everyone will recognise straight away.
I think it's a great one, because we've got to this, you'll have to have a look at the playlist. I'll send you. Do you do Spotify?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you a link, because there's been some really good surprises on it as well. So it's becoming a good playlist. So those 3 tracks are going on there. We'll love you and leave you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you would have gone mad if we hadn't asked you.
I would have been so mortally wounded.
That's great.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, and thank you, Paul.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cavern Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we can't do this without you, the audience. So please like, share, and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, get involved on our socials and tell us your Cavern stories. See you next time on the Cavern Podcast.